Well, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Dartmouth School Committee to order for Monday, March 1st, 2021. Could I have a roll call, please, Ms. Genther?
Chris Oliver.
Here.
Shannon Jenkins. Kathleen Amaral.
Here.
John Nunes.
Yep.
Mary Waite. Here.
Thank you very much, everyone. Just so my colleagues are and the public is aware, Dr. Jenkins could not be with us this evening. She has another personal matter that she had to deal with, so we wish her well. As a reminder, per Governor Baker's order, suspending certain provisions of open meeting law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, the public will not be allowed to physically access this school committee meeting. Members of the public can access this meeting via live stream at youtube.com/DHS TV Media. In addition, the event will be rebroadcast on DCTV channels 9 and 18 on the following days. Wednesday and Thursday at 5 p.m., Friday at 6 a.m., Saturday at 8 a.m., and Sunday at 2 p.m. The school committee reserves the right to implement additional remote participation procedures and will notify the public of these procedures as soon as practicable. With that, I want to thank everyone for making the time this evening to carve out another Monday night to discuss two important topics that are on tonight's agenda. One being the FY22 budget presentation, as well as the possible return to school and COVID-19 update. With that, if it's okay with the committee, what I'd like to do is I'd like to flip-flop these two. And I'd like to start because we do have our Director of Public Health in Dartmouth with us this evening, Chris Meshard, and I know he is, time is of the essence for him and everything that he does right now. So if it's okay with everyone else, Mr. Nunes?
Mr. Chairman, just real quick on the agenda, the approval of the minutes from February 22nd, just to get those out of the way.
Sure. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the regular session minutes of February 22nd, 2021.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Amaral, second by Mrs. Waite. On the motion, any further discussion? Chair hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And if we actually roll call, I'm sorry, we're
Yeah,
remote
roll
this
call.
evening. Roll call.
Chris Oliver.
I will abstain.
Shannon Jenkins. Kathleen Amaral.
Yes.
Mary Waite.
Yes.
John Nunes.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you,
Thank you,
Mr. Nunes.
Chairman.
Appreciate that as always. And unless anyone else has anything that they disagree with flip-flopping these, I'd like to turn this over to Dr. Gifford with a COVID-19 update, continued discussion, and expanding in-person learning.
Can I just interject, Chris? Do we need to open up to public comment? I have Kate.
You know what? Yes, let's, my apologies as I'm getting back into the remote swing of things here.
Yeah.
And I've got a couple of things. I got papers spread out everywhere.
Yep.
Thank you. So at this time, we typically allot 10 minutes for public comment. Anyone wishing to speak on any of tonight's agenda items can do so by emailing our recording secretary, Kathleen Genthner at dartmouthschools.org. Typically what Kathleen will do, or what Ms. Genthner will do, is she will acknowledge that she received them and she will forward them to the committee. I know that there was a few today. Ms. Genthner, have you had any other ones come through since we've started?
There were 4 received. All were forwarded to the committee. I have not received any since about 4:37.
Okay. Thank you. So as a reminder, we will circle back around at the end of the meeting if anyone wishes to comment specifically on any of tonight's agenda items. We'll go back and we'll check in with Ms. Genthner, and they will become the official part of the meeting minutes. I don't think I'm missing anything else at this time. I miss one meeting. I miss one
You know?
meeting and throws me for a loop. So thank you. At
Mr.
this
Chair?
time,
That's
yes,
understandable.
Mrs. Amaral?
I just wanted to clarify so that people, know that we do get those emails from Kate. And while they're a part of the record, we've been able to review them on our own. It's not like we're dismissing them. I just wanted to make that clarification for folks. In person, people can come up and speak. Remote, they're part of the record and we access and read them for deliberation. So I just wanted to
No,
clarify.
thank you, Mrs. Amaral. It's actually a very good point that, yes, while in person's a little bit different, when we are remote, yes, we do. All the committee, all 5 committee members receive anything that our recording secretary, Ms. Genther, receives. And I know personally, I take the time, I read each and every one of them.
I read them all, Mr. Chairman, and I even have them in a folder.
I have no doubt you still print out your papers.
No, I have them in a folder. I don't print them out. I have them in a folder.
Okay, I was
put them in a folder. I learned how to put them in a folder.
I'm happier to hear that, Mr. Nunes. Dr. Gifford, we're going to turn it over to you at this time.
Okay, thank you. I know we have a big buildup here, but just as a little background to tonight's discussion, as you remember, as we started this terrible journey into COVID and pandemic since last year in March, the district, as required by DESE, created 3 plans, and one of them was a full return to school plan. So while we never then went into complete detail on that plan, knowing that we had to either do remote or hybrid at the time, that plan is in place. And at that time, we had our principals, along with our maintenance, et cetera, do what it was a feasibility study and measure our classrooms using the 6-foot social distancing requirement at that time. And as you recall, we made the decision at that time to we were not able to bring everyone in, of course, and went with the plans that we did, the remote and the hybrid. Since that time, as you know, we had already started discussing how we were to start to return more students, expand the in-person learning a few weeks ago. Even prior to February vacation, the administration had been meeting. We met with our building leadership to discuss the re-examining of our classrooms, to really start taking a hard look at what would we need to start to expand in-person learning, get more and more kids into school. That involved not only remeasuring classrooms, but also taking inventory of furniture. I want folks to know that over the last few years, our district has shifted to a lot of collaborative learning, which required us to purchase many desks and round tables, et cetera, so students could work collaboratively. With that said, that minimized the number of individual desks that we have. People might think that's a trivial point, but it's a very important point when you're trying to create classrooms and maintain specific distances between students, as we have done this entire year. With a 6-foot distance, desks have been placed strategically to make sure that that happened. So there were many things that have been going into our planning and our discussions about, as we see the virus seem to be trending, the positive cases trending downward a little bit, and vaccines coming out, et cetera, that the good time now would be the good time to start moving towards that direction of bringing more and more students back. Lo and behold, last week, our commissioner announced, unbeknownst to, I happened to be watching the Board of Education meeting that morning, and saw live as he announced that he was shifting gears and asking for a couple of things: authorization, which he will come forth to the Board of Education with a specific plan to ask for authorization to take remote and hybrid, eventually hybrid learning off the table, relative to how districts are able to count on-time learning, that, you know, students have so many hours that we have to provide for various levels that count for learning. And that was like a little surprise out of the bucket, like, shoo, there it was. But with that said, there's also been a shifting to, as far as the transportation goes, that for elementary level, capacity has been limited. The capacity limits have been eliminated. As you know, we've been using distancing on our buses, students, one student to a seat, etc. So with all those shifts, anyway, we were already in conversation about increasing student capacity in our classroom. So we just continued on with that conversation. And there's going to be a lot of, I'm sure, back and forth questioning as we go forward with this. What I would say is that, and I'll offer some dates and a draft timeline of what we're looking at of bringing our elementary students back at this time. And I know that the commissioner was focusing on elementary as well, not so much middle and high right now. In his, if I recall, they're looking at by April that we would have our elementary level back into the buildings, and then focus on middle and high later on. With that said, any movement that we make, and of course we have Mr. Michaud here that we actually spoke with him again this morning. We speak with him constantly, but he'll be able to help you out with some questions you might ask. The mitigation strategies that we've been using, mask wearing, distancing in hallways, etc., would remain. We would be looking at a minimum of a 3-foot distancing in classrooms in order to be able to bring those students in. Excuse me. We also spoke about contact tracing, which I believe with our conversation this morning would remain at looking at that as a 6-foot distance around folks if a student was positive or a teacher, etc. And also we have already asked our principals to take a hard look at how lunches would be served. Right now, as you probably remember, we've been serving lunches in the classrooms because we maintain that 6-foot distance. That would have to remain. So the principals are looking at this point on how they might be able to serve lunches, whether it's a shifting kind of thing or whatever it might be. So those are a couple of the details that, again, our building level folks are looking at to try to make this happen. With that said, our proposal, we've looked at a lot of things, and unfortunately, Mcas is still in the mix. And not that that's driving things that we're doing, but we're trying to alleviate scheduling problems that, for example, if, let's say we were able to bring all our elementary students in, our 3, 4, and 5 would be taking the Mcas, our principals would know how to be able to schedule, whether it's a hybrid Mcas schedule or a full in-person schedule. So that's important for them as we move forward on this draft proposal. The other thing I will say that at this point, all students that are in virtual learning at this point, such as our virtual academy at the elementary, will remain in that model of learning. That wouldn't shift, even though, you know, the commission is speaking about not getting credit for remote and hybrid. That would be, of course, later on next year. Students that were in virtual would remain in virtual. So anyway, our thinking is at this point, as I said, we had 2 options, one an earlier in March option, but we, after considering everything, including having to purchase, order desks, really think about the Mcas, et cetera, hoping that vaccines move forward, we would be proposing that on March 29th, grades pre-K and K would begin their full in-person learning, followed by April 5th, grades 1, 3, and 5, followed by April 12th, grades 2 and 4. The reason that we're trying to bring the older students in a little bit earlier than we had thought of before, rather than go like pre-K, K1 to right up the line, is, once again, even though the Mcas is the ugly word, if it is still on the table right now, and if we were to still continue with that, we would want those guys in school for a bit before we just say, okay, by the way, just come up to school and now take an Mcas test. So we wanted the older kids to get in, get settled, and all of that, and then be able to test. Currently, the Mcas dates at ELA starts in April 5th to May 17th. And math would start, the window is April 26th through May 28th. So that would give us time to be looking at that. I think that's a general overview. And again, you know, I know we all want students back. We are concerned about the mental health, et cetera, but we're also concerned about maintaining safety. There are a lot of logistics. As much as folks might not want to think that there are a lot of things that are happening to try to get this happening. I will say, I don't want to really talk about middle and high school tonight because I think I'm more focused on elementary, but at this point in time, looking at, we don't see it as very feasible for middle and high school to shift into full in-person at this time. The purchasing of desks is like 600 desks at the middle school to make that happen. The spacing is not like the spacing is much more difficult to get a 3 to 4 foot spacing in classrooms. I know Mr. Kiley can certainly speak to that. He went over and measured with the admin again. And there are many reasons at the high school. You have all spoken about this prior, cohort mixing. We are in all full synchronous at the high school at this point. Not to say that there's more that we can't and would be looking to do. But right now, we just like to focus on our elementary, and if there's some way we can get them in school, we'd like to do that. So with that.
Thank you, Dr. Gifford. I appreciate that summarization of trying to bring our students back in. I'd like to take this opportunity to first introduce and welcome our Dartmouth Health Director, Chris Meshard. Chris, I want to take this opportunity. I'm sure I can speak on behalf of my colleagues that the outstanding job that you and your team have done over this past year. It is amazing what your department has accomplished between the vaccination clinics, the contact tracing, the collaboration. I'm sure not only with the Dartmouth Public Schools, but with all the other departments in town. So on behalf of the Dartmouth School Committee, thank you for everything that you've done. We really appreciate that. With that being said, I'm just wondering if you could just take this opportunity, Mr. Meshard, just to kind of go over where Dartmouth is right now with numbers and trends, how you see it from a health point of view, I guess, and kind of what your thoughts are, if you have any concerns. And of course, this is our decision, but we look to you as the health expert for the town of Dartmouth. Any concerns that you would have as we look to bring more students back?
Thank you, Mr. Oliver, members of the school committee. I first want to just go on the record and just thank you for the kind words. And again, I know I've said it in the past and said it all too often during these clinics. It's been a group effort. None of this would have been possible without all of the tremendous people that have come together to work on this to protect the public health of the region. First, it started with the contact tracing and reopening plans, and then it moved into the clinics. And I've worked for the town for 25 years plus now, hit my 25-year mark in December. And never have I seen the town pull together like this before. Also to pull together with Westport, UMass Dartmouth, and work singularly with these clinics to conduct a clinic that was unlike that of any other in Bristol County, and for that matter, anywhere else in, I think, our region of the state, with the exception being Gillette. We pushed out 1,040 doses on February 13th out of the Dartmouth High School. In total, with our collaborative efforts, we pushed out 1,140 doses on that day. We conducted 2 clinics on that day, a second dose clinic for Moderna and a first dose for Pfizer. So that wouldn't have been possible without the extraordinary help of everyone. And since I'm before the school committee tonight, I just want to make sure that I thank all of those from the Dartmouth Public School System that contributed across all of the various functions of the Dartmouth Public School System, including maintenance personnel, the IT department, and all of the support staff, as well as clinical staff that work these clinics. Giving up a Saturday to come work nonstop is a hard thing to ask, and everyone has been there making this happen. Everyone has had nothing but positive things to say about how well we have all done. So just want to make sure that the school committee is aware of all of the great contributions from the Dartmouth Public School System personnel. Really moved by it. You know, being on the general government side, we never have a chance to work that collaboratively as one. And first saw it with the contact tracing, now seeing it with other staff as well. So thank you. And you know, you've got great staff. So as far as where we stand on March 1st with COVID-19 transmission in Dartmouth, you know, it was right around this time last year, it was here in Massachusetts. And then shortly after, within, I forget the exact day, it was sometime in early March that it entered, I believe it was Easton, the first town in Bristol County. And then it was sometime towards late March that it arrived with the first case in Dartmouth. We saw the first initial spring surge and a very delayed response to that surge to come down. 6-8 weeks. We actually saw the surge continue to drop as the state reopened. And then we saw the belly last for a prolonged period of time through July and August. And then as we returned indoors, we saw the cases start to increase. And it wasn't until Thanksgiving and Christmas that we saw the fall surge or winter surge spike. And that surge had an interesting response where it dropped off much faster than the initial surge we saw in 2020. As to why, I can speculate, but we've continued to see a decline in cases over the last couple of weeks. And one thing that I've always, you know, noted is I like to see trends start to evolve. I believe I've noted in the past that I think that we can have influences on those trends that send them in the wrong direction. So we have seen a very positive response to, and I hate to say positive because with COVID, it seems to be a negative. So anyhow, we've continued to see this steady decline from those holiday high case counts. I don't think that we are out of the woods with this at all, where we can, you know, I worry that we can see somewhat of a, it's all over, no need to worry, we can relax. A few weeks ago, we had some conversations. On those conversations, you know, I noted concern about Super Bowl and school vacation. I don't think Super Bowl so much had the effect. I'm still on the fence about school vacation. Last weekend, we didn't see a whole lot of activity in case counts, and I don't like to typically look at individual days for case counts because you have to see a trend. Days can spike and fall. You really want to look at those 7-day reporting periods and then look at them for several weeks. But my phone was very active last night. I saw a lot of text messages on it. I saw so many text messages in a short time, I thought it was going to crash like the Mass Vax site last Thursday. We're about 7-8 days out from school vacation. So I still remain concerned. When I started as director in 2014 with the town, we were facing the measles outbreak. And one of my concerns about communicable diseases is that school vacation week is the jackpot, is the lottery for a communicable disease, because people go off to travel, people return to school, young families. So you have opportunity where it hits multi-generations, or at least different cohorts, different school districts, different schools, different workplaces. So I would still like to see what results, or hopefully doesn't result from school vacation. And as we've seen, that can take, 10, 12, 15 days. So hopefully, you know, sometime around the 8th or so, we'll start to establish whether what we saw over the weekend was just a fluke or whether there's going to be somewhat of a response to maybe some travel.
Okay. So very helpful, Mr. Meshard, and thank you for your kind words as well to the Dartmouth Public Schools. So I have no doubt that I'm happy to hear how we accommodated you and your staff and the residents in Dartmouth. So thank you for that. I guess from the committee's point of view, one of the things that we're looking at is, like Dr. Gifford said, we're looking at a March 29th return date. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Gifford, but for pre-K and K, and we're still only 1 week out from school vacation. So I think it's important to note that one way or the other, whatever we decide to do, it's important to really watch, and correct me if I'm wrong, what you had said is really watch this next week and what the trend is over this next week in Dartmouth, and to see if, you know, to see where our case count is in another week or so. Is that what I'm hearing?
That would be my recommendation. It's, you know, it's the other concern I have is that I haven't had, with all of our involvement in activity with vaccination clinics, I haven't had a chance to really dissect the amount of testing going on in the area. But even I am a little concerned as well with the amount of testing, that it's not as broad across the population of Dartmouth as we would think by the number. So the last time I checked the dashboard to see where we were in Dartmouth for our 14-day testing, I want to say it was somewhere around 4,500 tests. But we know UMass Dartmouth is back in session, and there are some more students there, and they have sports. So some of the sports programs do have aggressive testing. So with that being said, there are more tests being conducted at the university this time around than there was back in the fall semester. And they may make up a very significant amount of the overall tests that are showing up in the weekly dashboard that the state puts out on Thursdays now. We also know that we have a fair amount of surveillance testing going on at our congregate living facilities. So that'll further drive down the number of tests occurring throughout Dartmouth within the general population. And as such, we may not be getting the true percent positivity. It could actually be a little bit higher since we're so focusing on these select locations. Some of this is speculation. I'd really like to look at it more, but UMass does contribute a significant number of those tests.
Okay.
So
no, that's really good. That's really good information.
And I could probably get better information for you on the exact number of tests with the most current dashboard that's going to come out, and then we can just back that out and know exactly how many tests are truly coming out of Dartmouth. You know, I've been by the Whales Tooth parking lot at least once in February, and the place was completely abandoned, and it was open. So
I can personally speak to that I was there several times over February vacation, and the appointments were readily available, and there was really no wait at all, which is concerning because there's the lack of testing. So with that, I have a couple of questions, if you don't mind, Chris, and then I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues just for the health, and they can ask any health-related questions that they may have before we say goodbye to you and let you go back to your life. So, a couple of questions that I have gotten is that through emails and through parents in town is that they're hearing, like we know that, and I know, and everyone on the board knows that you did a phenomenal job. You even spoke about the clinic, the municipal clinic you held at Dartmouth High School. And I actually, several emails that I received talked about, well, why isn't Dartmouth doing more of these clinics, like, and of course there's maybe some false information, maybe some misinformation, but they're saying like how old, someone mentioned Old Rochester Regional or the Tri-Town or Fairhaven, but just so it's out there, this is at the state level that they diverted vaccines away from the municipal clinics to the mass vaccination sites. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. The state has diverted a lot of the vaccine supply to the mass vaccination sites and has set up a series of metrics that some of which hasn't even been published yet, as to what they will allow for clinics or providers to receive vaccine going forward. I'm a bit troubled by some of it. Some of it's very arbitrary, and I'm already starting to see some actions by the state that contravene what they put out as requirements. So I'm investigating it. I'm asking, I'm prodding. I don't take no easily for an answer, especially in the county, which has been most underserved with vaccine distribution and administration. We're the lowest ranked in the state.
Really?
Lower ranking than Franklin County, which is essentially, it's kind of like a no man's land of Massachusetts. We're lower than Martha's Vineyard with a lower density, and lower than Nantucket with a lower density. And even with all the chatter out on Cape Cod, we're still lower than Cape Cod. So.
Wow. No,
Yeah.
that's really helpful. That's extremely helpful data. Now with that, some of the things that we as a committee hear quite a bit, and as well as not just the committee, but Mr. Kiley, Dr. Gifford, administrators, is that when we're making decisions and when the Dartmouth Public Schools administration are making decisions, we're not looking at we're not looking at science, we're not looking at data. And I want to reassure the viewing public and anyone else that may watch the replay of this meeting that is simply not true. And just with the fact that you're with us this evening speaks volumes. In addition to, I know for a fact that you have at least weekly, if not, multiple times a week, conference calls with the school department, Mr. Meshard. Is that correct?
That is correct. And as well as a lot of the staff at the schools, the nurses, administration, whether it's principals, athletic director, Dr. Gifford, Mr. Kiley. There isn't a day that passes without multiple conversations. I speak more to the staff of Dartmouth Public Schools than I do in the town hall.
And we thank you for that. But I knew that was the case, but a lot of the times it's important to get that out there and let the public know that we really do. We're not just making arbitrary decisions in the school department. We're looking to the experts in the health field, especially the local health field, as to what is best for Dartmouth and for our students, our faculty, staff, and the residents of Dartmouth. So in addition, I have two more questions and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues. Right now, correct me if I'm wrong, we are in phase 2, group 2. That's what is eligible right now is for the vaccine distribution. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So group 3, which is not yet eligible, and I'm looking at the MassGov site right now, puts educators in the group with a number of other categories of workers. So based on what we know right now, the way the vaccination site, the website is running, and with 65,000 minute wait, I think was the last that I heard, they're saying that originally they said that educators and school staff would probably they would be opening up phase 2, group 3, sometime in the middle of March. Do you think, just in your opinion, do you think that's really possible that could happen by the middle of March? And I don't want to put you on the spot. If you can't answer it, that's fine too.
Well, no, I can just speak to the facts. So if we look back to the phase rollout and when the governor has made the announcements about advancement to the next stages or categories, he always seems to be falling right in line with where those colors met those various lines on the month. Have they always been appropriate to the amount of vaccine that we have on hand? No. So a week ago Friday, the state announced that about 251,000 people over the age of 75 had been vaccinated. And they had already made, I forget where they were, but they were already rolling out the 65 plus and the comorbidities. At that point, we were, depending upon where you were pulling the numbers from, 400,000 plus people in Massachusetts over the age of 75. You were just below 60%. I heard some calls and there was a lot of accolades about the state's success in vaccinating that age group. Well, now that I'm before the school committee, I ask if 60% is success on a test. I don't believe that it is. I think that it's a failure. I think they were a little too aggressive with it in rolling that out to the 65 plus. I still get a lot of calls from 75 and older residents throughout southeastern Massachusetts that are trying to get vaccine access now while competing against a younger age group. Comorbidities doesn't have any age exclusions unless they are under the age of 16. The Pfizer has a cutoff of 16, the Moderna 18. So where I'm going at that is based on his track record of seeming to follow that color-coded timeline in the mid-March, if he does such again, we're still going to be competing against hundreds of thousands of people that are looking for access to the vaccine. So if he puts the teachers into that chaos of the mass vax finder, it's just going to be like winning the lottery or seeking out that concert ticket or that Super Bowl ticket. The governor did create a special means for certain groups to have access or easier access to the vaccine. Most notably and most recently with the Affordable Housing Initiative, the affordable housing population, such as housing authorities. So what he allowed is for housing authority managers to find a clinical partner, such as a health department, pharmacy, so on, reach an agreement by which the two would work together to vaccinate that population. And I can say that based on my work with one of these properties, that we did that. It will make it faster and easier for those residents. But some 2 weeks in, we still have not received the vaccine yet. In the overall scheme of things, once we do receive the vaccine, it still will make it easier for all of those residents. Some would have been lucky and been able to find the vaccine sooner. But if we look at the whole population at that property, they'll be better served with that process. So hopefully the governor recognizes that that is a model that would be best suited for those eligible workforces that he determines most need that type of access to the vaccine. He certainly did it with the housing authorities and with the school teachers, going back into, with DESE and their discussions and chatter about what they would like to see in the springtime ahead, to put them into a workplace that's going to be denser than any other workplace in terms of people in a singular room and close together, and needing those teachers in that setting. This seems to be the only way in which we can get teachers vaccinated effectively. Otherwise, you'll have staff within the Dartmouth public school system that may never see access to the vaccine until after the close of the school year. if this frenzy continues. So hopefully, with the efforts of lobbies and associations and school committees, reaching out, crying out to DESE, the governor's office, and other elected officials, that something like that can happen. Without that, it's going to be chaos.
Completely agreed. And I got one more question, but I think it's important to note, I think this is a good time segue into, in doing some research over the weekend, this is right off of a PDF from the CDC's operational strategy for K-12 schools through phased mitigation. This is what they had to say about vaccination for educators. Vaccination for teachers and staff in communities as soon as supply allows. Teachers in school, and this is directly from the CDC. Teachers and school staff hold jobs critical to the continued functioning of society and are at potential occupational risk of exposure to SARS-CoV. In order to support safe school reopening, state, territorial, local, and tribal officials should consider giving high priority to teachers in early phases of vaccine distribution. Access to vaccination should nevertheless not be considered a condition for reopening schools for in-person instruction. Even teachers and staff if they are vaccinated, schools need to continue the mitigation measures for the foreseeable future. But they spell it out right in the CDC guidelines that education staff, as well as anyone in the education, teachers, early childhood community, should be prioritized. And the state of Massachusetts has fallen far short of that. One last question that I got from a parent. I know we spoke briefly about this at one of our last meetings, but one or two parents had asked, would pool testing, we decided, and I know that Dr. Giff and Mr. Kiley had this conversation with you, Mr. Meshard, would pool testing that was offered through the Department of Education help to get our students back in the buildings faster? And Dartmouth opted to not consider pool testing. And I just want everyone to understand what was the rationale behind that.
So I'll just try to keep it brief. You know, I looked at pool testing. I know that there is a local school that is doing some form of pool testing, and there are a lot of complexities to it. It's not as easy as it sounds. It puts another burden on staff and stress on staff, because what pool testing is, just really in summary for those that are listening, is you take a cohort, you sample them, you take all of those samples, you run it as one. If you get a positive hit, now what? Which one of that 5, 10, or 20? So all pool testing is designed to do is to reduce the cost of testing. But there's a human side to it, because now you've got a positive pool, and what are you going to do with that positive pool? And what are you going to do with the staff at the Dartmouth Public Schools, or any public school, or any private school that, you know, ordinarily have a full-time job to begin with? Now they're going to have to be diverted, whether that's a school nurse, an administrator, support staff, all of the above, are going to have to then say, all right, all of these kids now have to go home. Do we do contact tracing with them out of an abundance of caution, get them retested? It's a nightmare. What about kids that can't come in and get retested? Is this an exclusive cohort? Are there other cohorts? Like buses, for example. I can't believe the amount of time that has been spent on watching bus videos by administration, and it's got a value to watching that. It's been very protective of health of the public, including, you know, not just the students, but we also have, you know, drivers on the bus, adults. So it sounds good, but it really doesn't accomplish anything. I don't, you know, I've looked at it, we've talked about it, and I don't see what value it would hold to the Dartmouth public school systems. I see a lot of stress that it would bring to staff. And I as you well know, we've had many conversations. I have a lot of concerns about staff stress. I've seen it in the private sector and I've seen it in the public sector. and that we have to be very cognizant of that with the decisions we make. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate your time. I'm going to open it up to any of my colleagues that may have questions for Mr. Meshard. Mr. Nunes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris, a couple of things. Number one, again, thank you very much for everything you've done with the clinics, both at the high school and last week at the Council on Aging. I was one of the fortunate ones to get into the Council on Aging last week, and boy, I'll tell you what, it ran like clockwork. No issues, no problems. Everybody was very kind, courteous, you know, check in, go here, go there, go there. Got the shot, didn't even realize I had gotten the shot. Go sit out there for 15 minutes. You know, the young lady, you know, going by everybody, making sure everybody's okay, time to leave. Got my appointment on the way out. Same thing with Dartmouth High School. I thought that ran absolutely great. So again, my thanks to you. I know you had to oversee everything, and why the governor decided to change things from something that was really working well to blow it up at other areas is, besides, you know, doesn't make sense to me, but that's that. Anyhow, two questions I have for you, Chris. You know, you know, I need your input on this. Of course, the Commissioner of Education is talking about, you know, bringing everybody back and such, but what does that do with, you know, he's wanted everybody at 6, and now all of a sudden, now we can go at 3 foot and change everything with the busing. You know, what does that do? You're looking for your opinion on that. Then I have one more question.
Okay, so I can answer that question. So it definitely will add a lot more complexity to contact tracing, because it will increase the number of close contacts, not only in the classroom, but also on the bus. And depending upon where that student may be, it could include, for example, the bus driver or the teacher.
Yeah.
We know that those are very specialized positions, and they're not, you know, you just can't replace them. So, you know, the loss of those positions can have an impact on the functionality. And I also know that, you know, at the town hall early every morning, watching the school buses loop through, it is an older age group that typically drives the buses, which is more at risk. And, you know, if there was transmission, you know, a risk of concern there. So I know that's not part of the question, but it does definitely concern me when you put that many people in an enclosed vessel. We've seen so much transmission with cars, and to essentially, with the transportation requirements that they're proposing, put children in these buses, for all intents and purposes, as densely seated as they usually are. That's a pretty, even with windows open, it's still a pretty significant opportunity for transmission, risk of transmission.
Thank you. And my last question, and you know, your opinion, and not holding anybody's feet to the fire or anything of this nature, but you know, if all of a sudden, you know, the governor sits there and the powers to be say, yeah, you know what, we're going to vaccinate, you know, all the teachers can get vaccinated and that type of deal. Would you recommend, your thoughts on spreading that vaccine out over a couple of weeks so that, you know, not everybody's getting that second shot at the same time, so that, you know, there are people that have had minor reactions to it type of deal, so that, you know, per se, we didn't have to shut school down because everybody, you know, all of our faculty and staff and support staff got a vaccine on a Wednesday, and 3 or 4 weeks later, they go back on a Wednesday, and, you know, all of a sudden Thursday afternoon and Friday, they're under the weather just because of a potential, you know, reaction to one of the vaccines that's out there that everybody talks about?
That is definitely a concern. There are some concerns around holding vaccine. The governor has a race to vaccinate. And yes, we do want to get vaccines in arms as quickly as possible. But should we be doing this on a race by the day, or can we achieve the same at the end of the month and step around those issues like you mentioned? And then they also will penalize sites for holding vaccine if they fall below a certain metric. But if they were to roll out something like the housing initiative, then that wouldn't be subject to a metric. But what you can also do when you roll out vaccine to a closed group, such as, let's say if they said, hey, you can do the educators, you can coordinate the second dose with maybe either a long weekend on a Friday afternoon and have the weekend to recover. In the younger population, it is common for people to have side effects that make them want to stay in bed the next day. But that seldomly lasts beyond that day. So if you could hold a clinic on a Friday, for example, you'd have the advantage of the whole weekend. And ideally, for a large school district such as like Dartmouth Public Schools, my opinion would be let's work with the Pfizer, because we can shorten the time between the two doses to 3 weeks versus the 4 weeks with the Moderna, and get people that second dose, complete the series, and start to move on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm good. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate all your help.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nunes. Mrs. Waite.
Hi, Chris. I just want to echo what my colleagues said, and thank you for all the work that you've been doing. You've been a tremendous resource for us. My colleagues did ask them the same questions. I'm concerned about the busing. I thought that guideline just seems, the free-for-all status of the elementary school. It's really concerning to me. Just based on all the hard work we've done, and just knowing the simple work that Jim Kiley has put into looking at the bus videos. I mean, I can't even imagine how that's gonna play out. But one concern, I'm disappointed, in Commissioner Riley, that we are not, really prioritizing vaccinations for our teachers. And, we've talked about that. As we look at the risk, if we're bringing in our elementary teachers, I've read a few studies, and but I trust your judgment much more about younger students not being as much of a risk factor to their educators as our older post say middle school and high school students. What can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what do you see as the risk for elementary educators having students in the classroom? Is it do we see a change at a certain roughly at puberty? What are your concerns there if we're reducing we're going down to 3 feet? Necessarily we're going to have more exposure in kids. So can you talk about that risk if we cannot get those educators vaccinated by the time that they're returning to school with the pre-K on the 29th, but even on April 5th, the 5th graders who are older, we're talking about some 10 and 11-year-olds. So
that's a tough question, because we got to look at the individual in the classroom, and as long as there is a risk to that individual teacher, and that's going to be on whatever their age is, their profile is, do they have any comorbidities? That's a concern. So, getting that vaccine to the teachers, I wish I was governor. I would have put the teachers in phase 1. With all the groups that they opened in phase 1, the teachers should have been there. If you've got a teacher that's in their late 60s, any complications, I wouldn't want to create a threshold to say that, if there was a child in there that was asymptomatic of a certain age, that would be
Mhm.
fine. Whereas if the child was a little bit older, then that wouldn't be fine. Risk is risk. So,
Okay.
and, not knowing the individual, we have to look at, how do we protect everyone in all of this, and really set that bar high. The schools have done a tremendous job. They've been the safest place for people during the worst of it. But I do feel as though that Commissioner Riley is being, very aggressive, especially with that school bus guidance. That's, I don't know if he's aware of how old a lot of bus drivers are, but, that may drive some people back into retirement.
I think, again, I think we've covered a lot of it. Just, the vaccine is just the key, just hoping that guidance can come through and we can prioritize our teachers, because I'm very concerned for the added stress. We're coming to the end of this. It's right in front of them. We're so close. And we've done, again, and I have to credit all the work that, Bonnie, Jim, everybody has done to keep our, staff, so safe. I guess my other question is, we hear about these new strains that are coming. Have you had any indication that, from what I understand, we're hearing about, one in California and New York. How is that factoring into your thoughts on Dartmouth, and, how that's going to, what are your thoughts there for how that might change our reality, I guess?
I don't remember when it was. Was it a month ago? Might have been sometime in January when the UK variant first entered the Northeast, and we were talking about that. And there was a lot of concern. I believe that entered our discussions about Dartmouth's transition out of the holiday schedule. And, so far, there's at least 3 other variants that they're now talking about.
Right.
We have to wait and see. It's just too early to tell. And, the one thing that we've got on our side right now is that it's March 1st. And hopefully we have a wonderful springtime and people get outdoors and get out of the indoors, and we can get windows open and get people spread apart again, and use that as a tool as we wait to get vaccinated and get more people vaccinated. And then get to learn more about these vaccines and variants and what all of this means. This is the vaccines coming in and how they respond to the variants, or the variants respond to the vaccines. That's all going to take months to really have any data on it to truly know. There certainly can be some speculation. So, it's a great question. And, we have our internal discussions. We had ours this morning in the office, myself with the nurse, Maura Reimer, and just too early to know.
Okay. Well, thank you for, trying to answer. I really appreciate all your insight. I mean, it's incredibly helpful. So thank you.
Thank you.
Defer to my colleagues.
Thank you, Mrs. White. Mrs. Amaral, do you have anything to add?
I really don't have anything. Everybody's asked some, just the range of questions that I have here on my my notepad. I thank you, Chris. Anything that anytime that we're, unfortunately, due to COVID, it's a necessity, but you're just a wonderful collaborative partner in this community, and you always, and your staff, look out for the greater community always. And it's just such a pleasure to have your expertise at our hands, and all the work that you've invested and your team has invested in collaborating with us is so appreciative. It's so important. I don't have any additional questions. Everyone's touched upon all of them. Just like personally disgusted, where teachers aren't, this isn't the only population of people that were overlooked as far as prioritization for the vaccine, caregivers of vulnerable people, disabled people, unpaid caregivers versus paid personal care. So there's lots of communities that are really stressed out about the mishap with the prioritization of this vaccine. But specifically to to not prioritize, like you said, a community of a workforce that, you know, is so typically densely populated. You know, my office, I have about, I'm working from home, but in my office, I have, gosh, like 8 people total. But you're talking about teachers with classrooms between 17 and to 20, mid to high 20s in some cases, and not prioritizing them in the planning, not putting them first, but then asking the board to not give credit for folks that are in remote and hybrid next year. Asking for this, you know, just stating that a couple weeks ago, it was sort of unexpected. Of course, everyone wants kids back to school. My daughter's teacher seems to be so at ease with the way in which she's teaching, but she's teaching 2 times, double the work, triple the work. And it's just incredible that we don't give credit to the people and to hear the commentary in the community that the teachers union, they don't want to go back to school. That is complete bull. Who wants to do their job 2 to 3 times, right? I mean, who wants to sit and do the same thing 2 days in a row with 2 different cohorts, double the work, double the energy, double the exhaustion, double the stress? So to those people that want to comment about that, it just really is disappointing to me. But I'll end with that. It's just, I hope that something changes. I hope that teachers are able to, you know, be prioritized soon, and that we get this, you know, past us. But I just thank you for your expertise and spending the time with us tonight and always, weekly, daily, like you said. I really don't have any other questions, though, just those comments.
Thank you, Mrs. Amaral. I appreciate that. And Mr. Meshard, thank you once again for your time. It's truly appreciated. Do you have anything else for the committee? You're more than welcome to stick around to continue listening, but I'm sure you have other things to do.
That is all. Thank you, Mr. Oliver.
Thank you.
Chris,
Thank
thank
you.
you very much. Appreciate everything.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you.
So that was indeed very helpful, Dr. Gifford and Mr. Kiley. Thank you for arranging to have Mr. Meshard come in. I think it helped clear up a lot of questions that not only the committee has, but as well as some of the community members that have reached out to the committee members with some of those questions. So with that, I guess I'll take the lead here. I'll kind of start off with my thoughts and opinions on this whole thing, and then, you know, we can open it up for deliberations. So like Mr. Meshard said, I think it's important that we really look at this next week as far as trends go and what data shows for the town of Dartmouth, you know, as well as specifically in the schools. We are looking at, Dr. Gifford is proposing right now to the committee a full return to school on March 29th for pre-K and K. Couple of things about that. You know, my first opinion is it makes me nervous without the vaccinations. But I do know that those are some of our more vulnerable students, our younger ones, and I'd love to be able to see some collaboration on trying to get more of those students back. I know it's not an easy task. I know the logistics around it between even we talk about, and I think it might, I forgot if it was who it was, but I know I've had this conversation with Mr. Kiley around desks. We know that in the pre-K and the K levels that there's flexible seating. We've migrated to flexible seating options and collaborative learning tables, and you can't use those right now, right? So I know that the Dartmouth Public Schools are using desks at those levels. We've moved them from other grades. So there's the logistics around furniture. Is that a fair assumption, Mr. Kiley?
That is, Mr. Oliver. Yeah, we, in preparation for half of the kids, we had to move desks from all over the district to shuffle around to make this happen. So even just with half of the kids, we had to do that. So it is very challenging to think of all the kids. there's, where I've gotten a couple of quotes for desks. There's a little bit of a lead time on those desks. So, we're looking at about a month to get those desks. So there's a lot of shuffling that needs to take place, and, to be able to provide a learning environment that, you can keep kids separate. And then, ideally, at some point, we want to get rid of the desks. So we'd like to go back to collaborative learning, I hope, someday in the future. So.
Right. No, fair point, and thank you for that, Mr. Kiley. So while I am certainly in favor of looking to how we can best bring our pre-K and K students back on the 29th, I think this is just my opinion. This is up for deliberation with the committee. That could be a target date, but that's certainly nothing is set in stone, as I don't think the past year nothing has been set in stone this whole past year. Some of the other things that I'm concerned about is transportation. It concerns me very much, the transportation on school buses, to me. And I know you can talk to one person and they'll say that there's been studies done that limits the exposure and there hasn't been bus transmission on buses. But I personally, in doing my own research, there's for every study that's out there, there's another study that says something different. Now, just keep in mind, once again, I'm looking at here, I'm just pulling up right off the CDC website. It seems to me that all of a sudden, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education in Massachusetts and on Governor, we were so careful with they allowed local districts, right? They allowed local municipalities, local school committees to develop in cooperation or approve in cooperation with the administration three plans back in August and September that we voted on. And we developed these plans. We ultimately ended up with a hybrid plan after a brief remote start. But it seems to me all of a sudden that because Commissioner Riley is saying we need to get students back in, and now I've heard this come up as well in the community. I think it's important to note that there are tens of thousands of students across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And I don't know if it was Mr. Meshard that said that, or if it was Dr. Gifford, that have not stepped foot in a school building since last March. Tens of thousands of students. And that is not the case in Dartmouth. I'm extremely proud of the job that Dr. Gifford, Mr. Kiley, the entire administration, the educators in our district. Without our educators, we would be nowhere. Let's right down to our custodial staff, our secretarial staff, our teaching assistants, everyone else. If there's someone that I'm missing, our bus drivers. And now with transportation, we're just going to throw caution to the wind, and they're saying let's keep the windows down a little bit for more air circulation. Meanwhile, the CDC is still recommending a 6-foot guidance. It came right out of President Biden's mouth at a town hall meeting a couple of weeks ago that we should not be stacking buses. And here's the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education saying, let's stack them and pack them now. To me, it just doesn't make sense. So I have concerns around transportation. That's not to say that it can't be done, or maybe look at some other different ways, but it's another concern. Bus drivers, I know Mr. Kiley, Dr. Gifford and I had a conversation around the concern, and just tonight, Chris Meshard brought up about bus drivers, about a fear of more students on the buses and whether or not that'll cause more fear and anxiety for bus drivers. So I do agree that we need to look at starting with our pre-K and K. I think that's a wonderful starting point, Dr. Gifford. Just a couple of other thoughts before I turn it over to my committee members. I also think that we should be looking at some of our high need students. Those students, obviously, we already are looking at some of our high need students, but I'm referring to it. And, I'm sure I see Mrs. Amaral shaking her head. Those students that may be failing classes, maybe having a real hard time, that I'm sure that the parents have reached out to our guidance staff at whether it's the high school, the middle school, the elementary schools. I think that's another area that we should be looking at, in addition to, and I've had several conversations with high school senior parents. I think we really should be looking at our high school senior class and how we can really support them and try to make this as memorable of a year as possible. And I think we're discussing this early enough that there's some kind of potential out there to make that happen. And I'd be more than happy to sit down and be part of that conversation. And if I can help in any way, I think those are the three areas. In closing, I will say this, that I am against a full 100% return to in-person learning without teachers being vaccinated. That's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I understand that the governor Commissioner Riley at the last Board of Education meeting had said that he was going to, sometime in March, in the next week or so, ask for the authority to take remote and hybrid learning off the table to count towards learning. And I say, until that happens, I am not in support of returning students fully to the classroom. I think what we're doing in Dartmouth, we're doing a phenomenal job. Our kids are in school every other day. I think the model that we have in place is working. I'm concerned about disruptions regarding changing the model at this point. And I already know that there's some people out there that are going to say, well, I know of teachers that are going to refuse the vaccine. They're not, or staff members that are not going to get the vaccine. Well, at that point, that's on them. I understand the vaccine is not 100% foolproof. We know this, right? The science and the data says that both the Pfizer and the Moderna, and now the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is even lower. I think at 76% Johnson & Johnson. But the Pfizer and Moderna is not 100% effective. We know that. We know that if teachers are vaccinated, and when anyone, not just teachers, but once individuals receive that second vaccination, 2 weeks after their second vaccination, we know that their immunity has been built up. However, according to the latest guidelines that I read, is that people still have to quarantine for 14 days after that second vaccination. So there's so many unknowns still. And I think we owe it to our teachers and everyone that works in a public school system, not just in Dartmouth, but across the state of Massachusetts, because I have friends that are in other states that are educators and they've already been vaccinated, that we can do better. Until then, I do not support a 100% in-person learning. I know that Dr. Gifford, you had mentioned regarding the middle school, really even struggling to get at 3-foot distancing at the middle school, all the students back. And then we also know about the high school situation with the cohorts and the mixing of the cohorts, which that really, when you bring everyone back with the different class levels and passing periods, that really heightens it. So I think we should absolutely look at pre-K, K, more of our vulnerable population, as well as seeing what we can do for the high school seniors. I've taken up enough of everyone's time, so I'll turn it over to my colleagues. Mrs. Waite.
Yes, so just kind of piggybacking on a little bit of what Chris has said, and I guess there's a little bit of back and forth questions for you, Dr. Gifford. You had mentioned too that you've been in conversations throughout the past month or so, talking about adding in those more vulnerable students and taking a look. And it sounded like you were talking about that, in relevance to the middle school and the high school. And, and I'm thinking of, and I've talked to staff who said, hey, maybe we can bring in, the students of the high school who have, failed 2 classes for the term or for the semester, for example. I'm sorry, my cat is part of this conversation, but anyway, so what is your current thoughts on that? Have you kind of looked at that assessment, Dr. Gifford? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention something when Mr. Oliver was speaking. I'm definitely concerned about those students, the ones that are not in programs specifically, but are still high needs. We did meet with the elementary principals prior when we were looking at that, and I know they've determined a couple of kids, only a few, I must say, that were coming in every day. The high school did end up extending that accommodation, if you will, to some students, and some of the students did take them up on it. What happened was sometimes the student is in class by himself, but the student was happy to be there. The parent wanted them there. Middle school, we're still just really reaching out. There are more scheduled times with them. So we haven't really brought them in, but I think especially if we're looking at the possibility of just bringing in our elementary, which is again, my focus, as well as our leadership right now, not the middle and high, that we will need to focus more on those let's call them we'll say high needs, but not program students.
Right.
So I agree with you, especially if we're going to extend that the middle and high stay out longer.
Okay.
I think I mentioned in the beginning that the middle school was looking at, they did send me 3 plans, and after this, I know they will be looking at more synchronous or live teaching. So we will have more of a schedule for that. I just also wanted to mention, I think going back to the whole commissioner thing, if you recall, we had to submit data for structured learning time for grade 4, grade 7, and grade 10. We submitted data onto what we were doing for each of those levels.
Mhm.
And we know, no good deed goes unpunished. The minute you send data to DESE. So in my mind and my colleagues' mind, they were really going after all those schools, which you mentioned, Mr. Oliver, that really have had remote learning from day one. There are districts that haven't had students in person at all. So now to make this blanket statement of everybody shift gears, as much as we want normalcy. I think, again, I'm very pleased with what the district has been doing. We were just talking to the elementary principals before all this started, and they were working on more synchronous learning. Once again, those teachers, you heard Mr. Porter and his colleagues speak about that at the last meeting. So to Ms. Waite's point, I think we do have to have a bigger conversation about those students that are struggling a little bit more. I do want to throw out a point for the high school parents that are listening, because I had conversations with high school this morning about a particular student that was struggling, had moved, but as the senior, we usually allow students to remain in the district to finish up the year. And I've also had a conversation with this, with Renee, our union president, et cetera. We really need to encourage high school parents to tell their students to come to school on their days to come to school. Mm-hmm. I'm afraid that some of them are taking the easy way out and too often are just staying home needlessly. I just want to throw that plug out there, as our teachers are working hard to provide those in-class times. Students, that synchronous learning was an option for when you're not feeling well, et cetera, but not to take advantage. That's just a little plug I was thinking of as you were speaking about that. Anyway, so yeah, we have more work to do, but if we can continue, as we just spoke about, getting a few students back in, starting small, that will be fine.
And then, and again, this is such a big discussion, and I think all of us are certainly aware, of, many of us are parents, grandparents, we have grandparent, just that it is challenging. I mean, and we know that kids are easily distracted at home, and we are all well aware, and we are living this, and certainly we're aware of the realities. I guess one, so many questions here, but I'll try to narrow. As we think about the in-person learning, I think what I want parents to understand, I kind of get the impression that some of the parents, again, looking at social media, think we talk about full return, it's back to normal. Everybody's going in, we're still doing our group work and everything else. It seems to me, as you kind of talked about, is not just the physical space in the middle school and the high school. One of my concerns is that there's certain classes that are simply due to limited materials. We're talking about microscopes, for example, in labs, space in labs, that will be difficult to run, that you've still been able to maintain a high quality of instruction because, largely because you're able to do it with a small group and you have half the class there. Would you mind talking a little bit about how that is? And do you have any concerns about that as we look at our, elementary school, that they've been able to bring, to do some special things because they have half the students that are going to be, is that going to be more challenging once they have their full students back? And now they're still dealing with trying to separate them. They have less space. I think about, even the gym class that we saw when, Potter was, and those are small rooms for gym, and you're trying to now have all the kids back, with ball, so I'm curious about how you see that kind of playing out. And also I'll step into that, the full return model that we had, and there's been kind of questions about that. There was a plan that was submitted, to be clear for everyone. Again, at that point, we hadn't lived through COVID. A lot of it was really hypothetical. We hadn't known, mask compliance. The kids have been really above and beyond great with mask compliance. I mean, I had concerns, are these little ones going to keep their masks on? I think they're better than adults. But there was so much that was unknown that now teachers have learned. I just wonder, like, at what point, are the teachers being part of these plans, coming to the table, talking about like, well, this was working well. Are they working with you? And and I know we have an upcoming date, in-service day on March. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I've had concerns with staff kind of wondering, like, are we going to be brought into the plans, and how is this going to play out? And they are definitely the people who know the best how this is going to work. So.
Right. I would definitely say this, you can't say that there wouldn't be changes as far as people being able to move around a classroom, use materials. You think about not so much at the elementary, but middle and high. I mean, I've been in those classrooms. I was a couple of weeks ago in Mr. Sam Brodsky's class with the robotics and think about that work that goes on. And if you had the full class, or a lab situation, for example, the labs are small. So yeah, to get more kids in there, I remember being in another class, a science class last year even, and how tight it was with so many kids. So yeah, there's definitely a difference when you bring more students in and what you can do with them. But as far as the teachers being involved in that goes back to our work with the leadership team. We meet with the entire leadership team, and then they go back to their schools where the best work takes place, because they're able to know the idiosyncrasies of their school, the details, and work with their teachers. And each school might be a little bit different. And so they definitely do work with them to see what works best, how to plan, how to roll things out. And our plan was, which we will still do, because our intention will be to at least focus in on bringing our students back towards the end of the month. March 8th, we have the full in-service. So we will be, elementary will be working together, teachers together, planning for that shift and adjustment in their teaching, their curriculum, how their classrooms are looking, et cetera.
Okay. And I guess my last question is Mcas. We don't have any ability to push this off. I mean, can you talk about that? That I just find that so frustrating. And this is not on you. I go back to my disappointment with DESE, and I just think it's crazy. But that, to bring these students in, I don't think it's a good diagnostic tool. We've already talked about this. We made a statement as a committee, but I just wanted to, I had some parents who were, kind of not, who said, oh, we're just bringing him back for Mcas. I absolutely don't believe that, at all. But it is an unfortunate fact that it's part of the reality.
Right. It's not the reason we're bringing anybody back. If someone else has that ulterior motive, I'm not aware of it. Our focus is, again, the entire goal for the entire year was to bring students in. Right. That's what we all want, right? Exactly. But it's a chink in the armor, so to speak. So to think about scheduling and bringing students in, we have to consider that and how to make that as less stressful as possible. And when does it occur? And the principals actually brought that up, that if we, to kind of know a schedule of when kids were coming, so they could plan for a hybrid MCAS or a full intern MCAS. So it's just part of the, like I said, it's a chink in the armor, but it's not the end all be all. It's certainly not the reason we were even looking at a few weeks ago. We've been planning this for a few weeks. Mm-hmm. I do want to go back to that whole furniture thing, because I don't think people fully understand that when the district shifted over the last few years to collaborative and learning, we got rid of a lot of desks. We brought in tables, we brought in flexible seating. The ideology, the philosophy changed, excuse me. So to say that now in preparation for bringing students back, because we know we would be in COVID still in March and April, so let's run out and buy 1,000 desks, is a ridiculous statement. It's a ridiculous thing. So now that we know that we're preparing for it, it's just one of the things we have been thinking about, and how do we go about it? It's not that it's impossible. It's just is it feasible? And it, so like you, Ms. Waite, I read all the stuff too, and it's
I know.
and sometimes I feel like we speak here and then people don't listen to what we say. So I think we circle back and say it 100 times. Oh my goodness.
And then, I'll echo what, Chris said too, or Mr. Oliver said about our seniors. I feel like, last year seniors, we made such a big thing, again, but they really got to do everything until March.
Yeah.
As sad as it was missing graduation, I just really hope that, I'll echo what, Mr. Oliver said, I really hope we can do something. I love this. They've got a lot of money in their account from what I understand. I have a junior, not a senior. I'd love to see them. It'll be a different scenario. Hopefully by June, maybe we can do a prom, a masquerade ball outside, but I'd like to see, yes. So maybe I'd like to see those, talking to some senior parents. They've been reaching out about that. They'd like to be involved. And I'm hoping that we have enough time that we get them. Again, I don't want to overstep here. This is more, high school territory, with Ross and everything, but I really, really want those kids to have that experience. I mean, they've missed, prom and graduation. They're not coming back into the school after, it's typically that Thursday, then graduation is Sunday. I hope that we can, do something for them.
Right.
So
Just on a positive note, and I know they're talking about it and they're considering all things, but I did see they had some their academic their advisory schedule, and Ross put out a statement that said, let's it was a time to inspire, especially seniors, to continue to stay the course.
Right.
Stay focused and get their academics done, because we're thinking they're planning specific events, but make sure you stay on track so that you're able to participate. So I haven't touched base with him on what that thinking is, but I will reiterate and emphasize that it's important for some kind of special events, whatever it might be, whatever we could do. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That's it. Thank you so much.
Right. You're welcome.
Thank you, Mrs. White. Thank you, Dr. Gifford. Mrs. Amaral?
Thank you. I just have one question. Like right now, as it stands, what is our average cohort size in say, let's stick with elementary school, up through 5th grade?
Yeah, about 8 or 9-ish, somewhere in there. I have explicit numbers of what it would look, but yeah, they're kind of low, because if I have the classroom numbers here, I'm looking at I'll just rattle some off quickly. So class sizes, for example, I'll just go across one school, starting with kindergarten, 17, 18, 20, 19, 18, 19. So a cohort is half of that, and that's about average.
Okay. And so in measuring, I'm personally not necessarily comfortable with, but that's just my opinion, I don't speak for the committee, with going to 3 feet. But with that 3 feet, have those measurements been done, and we could conceivably fit all of the students in with abiding by 3 feet? That measurement has been done to say for sure that.
Yes.
And then my next question, I read it all too. The desk piece, it's a problem, but would we be able to, I'm just thinking fiscally, responsibly, thinking of the budget, would we be able to utilize some of those desks for the younger learners, having 2 on each end and mixing in some desks? I know that's not ideal, but in order to still maintain 3 feet and fit all the students, or would the measurement be kind of reliant upon the fact that we're assuming that each student would be in their individual desk? I'm just, as an artist, I'm trying to visualize and spatially kind of recognize what we're working with here. I don't know, it's Mr. Kiley maybe.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So, unfortunately, a lot of those tables that we've been using at the elementary level, especially with the younger kids, aren't sized to keep kids apart this distance. So what happens is we really just wouldn't be able to fit the number of kids and still maintain that 3 foot plus distance, at those tables. So they're really not of use to us. Believe me, the idea of buying hundreds of desks to accomplish this and then not being sure what I'm going to do with the desks. There'll be new desks, so they will replace old desks, and obviously we'll be thoughtful about what, how we do it. But it's not appealing to me. But I don't really see any way that the existing equipment that we have could be modified and accomplish what we're trying to accomplish.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for all that you do, Mr. Kiley. And my understanding, and I don't know, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm wondering how 3 feet is going to work when thinking about, say, lunch, unmasking and lunch. My understanding is that still remains a 6 feet requirement. And so if we're thinking of bringing back pre-K through 5, how are we gonna manage that? What are some thoughts around how we're gonna, obviously we have to be creative. I think if any of us sit and think, oh, this has been an easy day, we're doing something wrong. Nobody's had days like that. I'm not even working for the district, and I certainly don't have days like that. But if you could speak to that a little bit about lunch. What
Sure.
are the plans?
Lunch is one of the more difficult scenarios, and in addition to lunch, mask breaks, right? Which, it's sort of similar to lunch. At that 3 foot distance, students should not be without a mask on. So we need to think about how we can accomplish it. Do we have a space where students can go to eat lunch? Well, we've already pretty much thought about that, and that's going to be very challenging to actually, accomplish, like a cafeteria, for instance. That's probably not a viable option for us. So, we go back to the idea of kids eating in the classrooms, and we look at shifts and trying to figure out, how we could have kids in the classroom eating and some kids with masks on in the classroom, sort of in like a checkerboard pattern is one idea that we're talking about, where, every other student essentially is eating and the other students are maybe reading or, but with their mask on. And then the other group eats. I mean, you just have to get creative and figure out ways to keep kids 6 feet apart. With masks. So it's not easy. It's one of the more difficult things. And we haven't decided on any specific solution, and it might be different from school to school as well. But depending on the space in each building, but yeah.
Great. Thank you. I mean, I don't mean to be flip, but it's almost like, hey, we'll throw it in the transportation guidance. Let them eat lunch and breakfast on the bus, right? All bets are off on the bus. Sorry. In some respects, I feel like flexible and fluid. I think we should take a step back. We always should take a step back and reflect, as you do, about practices and glass half full. I think of one thing that, on one level, kids, teachers, parents, community, we're at the end of our rope. We're frustrated. We just, we're suffering pretty significantly, all of us, no matter if we put that smile on our face, we are suffering. But in some respects, I think if we think about, for us, teaching an old dog new tricks, it's not always easy, but we've all been flexible and fluid, and we've made the best of it. And in some respects, I think that we're teaching our kids. You talk about our buildings. We need new buildings. That's a conversation for another day. Our buildings might not be adequate for 21st century learning, but I think the practices that we're modeling for our students and having things kind of shift on a dime, I think that the workforce, I think that their generation, our little guys moving up, they're going to be able to kind of move on their feet. And I think that that's something that we should remember, and that they're gaining skills. They're suffering, they're learning. It's not ideal, but they are gaining skills. They're gaining skills about being creative, about working as a team, about following rules, about caring for themselves, their teachers and their classmates. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in. On the next thing that Chris and I think Mary mentioned, I've always sort of been talking about high needs. Yeah, I have a child with significant needs. When I look at his needs, I don't think of him. I think of all learners. I think of the things that he benefits from. I've always said that I've seen the things that he needs as a benefit to others. Talk about differential seating for kids, standing, sitting, bean bags. It's helpful for all students at any given time. No better time to illustrate that than during COVID. And some of those things aren't possible right now and everything with keeping apart. But I'm very concerned about, my son is a clear example. Kids like my son, they're a clear example of needing prioritization. And that should be for sure. But then we have our kids that, are on ed plans, who we've brought a couple of them back in who are struggling. But I think that when we talk about, we're complaining about the prioritization of vaccine, I think that we really need to reflect on our own prioritization. And I would not feel comfortable struggling to get every single learner back until we sort of prioritize which of those learners need to come back first. The younger kids, absolutely. I'm not so sure K through 5. I'm personally sort of feeling like a K to 2 for different reasons. When you talk about legal age limits of grouping kids, perhaps even for those kids in inclusion classes that may not have, or whatever, expanding upon our own personal definition of high needs. And I think you've been doing that. It's been evolving, it's been developing, but I know just from hearing from a lot of families, there still are those kids, and I say K to 2, but I know that there are 3rd graders and 4th graders, and there are, all the way up, of course, who are some on ed plans, some not, who aren't prioritized, who I would love for us to prioritize those students. I think it is so important that we prioritize those students and bring them in and catch them up. And then I think of the freshmen who are in the high school and others in the high school, but I just think about, or those 6th graders who really didn't this year, and those freshmen who don't have the luxury of having the staff, unless their parents are like me and I send a book before my kids start school every year. I always send a book. This is how he grew up. This is what he needs. This is what he like. But not all people have to do that. I do, because I speak for my son. He's not able to communicate. But those kids that don't have the luxury of past years of teachers saying, wow, this kid is not a D student. I need to do better. So you've got those kids that are moving into a new building that, like I said, don't have the staff that understand their historical trajectory and who are struggling significantly. And that's not to say sophomores and juniors and seniors, or 8th graders and 7th graders, because there are those students whose parents haven't reached out or feel vulnerable to reaching out for whatever reason. But I know that they're reaching out to me, and it breaks my heart. And I hope that before we said we're not going to talk about middle and high, even though we might not be talking about middle and high tonight, we've got the timeline. I hope that tonight we could make a decision around digging a little deeper and identifying those students, even if it takes reaching out to their previous teachers, reflecting upon their school record, and identifying those kids that might be getting C's and D's or might not be showing it on their face, that they're struggling, but breaking down at home, and the grades might be reflecting. And sometimes the grades don't reflect. Maybe it's more of a mental health issue. I really hope that we could put something in place where we're able to kind of dig a little deeper to find those kids. And again, they exist in 3rd grade, they exist in 4th grade, they exist in 5th grade. Whatever we decide today, whether we decide to go back in person K through 5, or if, like I said, I feel personally more comfortable not cutting anyone out, but I feel more comfortable grouping and prioritizing those younger learners, pre-K through 2, but then also expanding upon our own, getting a little bit closer to the ceiling. Like Desi says, the guidance is the floor, we can go to the ceiling. I would love to see us go a little bit more to the ceiling and identifying those students who haven't met yet that threshold of full in-person learning, if at all possible. And I won't talk much longer because others have said so many good things. As much as we're hearing the loud noise of all of us want our kids back, but then there are those kids that, and this is middle school again, but we've heard from, and I don't know if the committee, I can't remember now, I believe the committee fully heard this as part of our public comment, or anyway, it's in my notes. There are families, there's been a theme of like some families that have come back from TECA because even though we kind of made some modifications to how we're dealing with the supporting students with TECA, and with some that's worked, and some others who, for health reasons, have feared return to school, they did change to hybrid because their kids were struggling just way too much and it wasn't working. And so now they fear going back full in person and just this concern about those families and the sensitivity around whatever we decide. Clearly, we're going to decide something that brings a bigger group of students back at some point soon. And so even in those instances where families are happy that their kids are going full in person, those kids are probably going to have the anxiety or the lack of etiquette that they were used to kind of, let me sum it up. I want to make sure that we also have a system in place where it's not punitive, where kids who might be acting out for behavioral reasons, understanding, and I know we are quite understanding as a district, and we're quite aware of our students' social and emotional needs, but an extra caution around recognizing that if a kiddo is acting out, it might be that they weren't so certain about returning to school as much as mom and dad were having them come back full in person. Because there's in other districts, unfortunately, and it hasn't happened here, but unfortunately, not all districts are as compassionate and supportive of their students as we are. I hear it in my work. And so I just want to be mindful of that because it could cause some other, manifestations of the anxiety that they're feeling. And I think that's all I really have right now. I'll pass it along to whoever. Sorry for taking so long.
No, please. Thank you, Mrs. Amaral. We appreciate your input. A lot of really good points. Mr. Nunes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few things. Number one, a simple, easy question. Mr. Kiley, talking about desks and, if we were fortunate enough to procure some, I'm going to assume that these are desks that are going to come, understand, in like a 2x4 box that, open a box and they've got to be put together. So somebody's got to put them together, whether it's a maintenance or a custodian. And I'm assuming that probably is going to be on a weekend because can't have them do it because of everything else that they've got to do between 7 and 3:30 for discussion purposes.
That's correct. They would come with the body of the desk and then the legs separate. So there are opportunities to provide that some of the companies that you can buy these from will do assembly. Obviously, there's a cost associated with that. We can do assembly in-house, but like you said, that has to be off hours. There's no way we can do that within any,
Now, it's just for curiosity's sake, because of the situation, is that something the CARES Act and the COVID grants would cover, or is that our budget?
Yes, sir. I think I'm confident that CARES Act funding will cover.
Okay, that's good. That's fine. A couple of things, and everybody's, kind of really touched on a few things, but I've got some notes that I did write down. We talked about a little bit of transportation earlier type of deal. I mean, everybody knows I live near the Quinn School and the middle school. And let me tell you, and I'm going to make an assumption that all the other schools are the same way, but it's an absolute nightmare. Okay. I've tried to pull out of my street, last Thursday or Friday, even this morning going to work. And I've got teachers pulling U-turns right in front of me. They come halfway down and they pull a U-turn instead of, the amount of parents that we have dropping off and picking up students is unbelievable. I mean, when I go by Quinn School at 10 minutes past 2 and there's already a parent there or parents waiting to pick up students, that are not getting out till 3 o'clock is unbelievable. And I'm assuming it's the same at, I've been by the middle school at 1 o'clock and, there are parents there. So, I mean, we've got some transportation issues that are, unbelievable. I mean, I know the transportation contract's up for renewal, but boy, that bothers me. I got to take my hat off to our administration. If I've mentioned this before, then I apologize, but I'm going to mention it again. I mean, I remember sitting in on a negotiation session a while back in 5:15 on a Friday afternoon or Thursday afternoon. And, Mr. Kiley gets a phone call from a elementary principal because there's been a COVID discovery and, everything switches from there into, what do we got to do with these students, the faculty, the administration, the staff, that type of deal. I mean, at 5:15 in the afternoon. So, I mean, thank you for what you guys are doing. And I guess kind of my last, because I did write all kinds of notes down when everybody was talking, believe it or not. In all seriousness, I think we've all gotten the emails from the faculty over the weekend with what's going on with the COVID. And I've got to go back to our January 25th meeting when we authorized the chair to, and I got Governor Baker's letter here. It says, "Dear Governor Baker, the school committee voted unanimously to urge the inclusion of teachers and school employees in phase 1 of COVID vaccines." And that's dated January 29th. We got one going to the governor. We've got one going to the Commissioner of Department of Public Health, one to our local Senator Mark Montigny, and one to our House Representative Chris Markey. Okay, we've done our part. If they're not moving off their backsides to vaccinate teachers, then maybe the teachers union and the MTA have got to reel in their sources and, start stepping on toes and raising their voices type of deal. But, with all due respect, yeah, I want teachers vaccinated. I want kids back in class. No disrespect to Dr. Gifford. Her and I had a discussion. I voted against the plan that she put together in August because I wanted everybody, and I still want everybody back. And I think what she's given us is a great plan. I just would, no disrespect to Dr. Gifford, I wish it included middle and high school. I understand, but I want all, for argumentative sake, 4,000 of our students back in front of their teachers. Okay, I want done with TECA because I'm sick of hearing what's going on with TECA, and all the other issues that are going on. I've had it. I want the kids back in the classroom. I want the teachers face to face with their students so that everything is good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm done venting.
You are very welcome, Mr. Nunes. Always appreciate your thoughts. What's that?
Tell it like it is.
Nope. We appreciate that. I appreciate it, all my fellow committee members. Just a couple of things after listening to what everyone had to say. I think it's important to note that have we reached out? I know at the beginning, Dr. Gifford, we survey parents, we put information out to parents. Have we done anything similar to that as far as getting the ball rolling on if they would send their student on their bus, if they would feel comfortable sending their students back fully if we were to go back full time? I'm just curious if we have any data on any of that.
No, we haven't done anything since. No.
Okay. Is that something that maybe, I'm not saying that we need to, but what are your thoughts? Do you think it's worthwhile just to get just check the temperature, lack of a better term, check the temperature in the room for, our parents, our families?
I think it would, especially if we put in place, like, at least I'll say a tentative plan. Let's say we went with the dates we proposed tonight. Again, not knowing if something's going to happen along the way, we can always back off of that. But to know, I think the bus transportation is really important. We had a pretty good sense on that the last time. Although I think Mr. Kiley also plans for everyone just in case. And to have a sense of, my thinking is no parent that is already in virtual is going to want to now come back now that we have more kids in. So I'm curious about what that data might show.
Sure. Mrs. Amaral?
I also worry if surveying parents, to some degree we're surveyed out, but I think if we did anything like that, it would be important to really emphasize that it's to take the temperature, because we all mentioned we know we've delete Facebook every other week, or I do, because I'm just so frustrated with the comments. But it's just heartbreaking. But I think that we inadvertently sort of weren't clear about it. When we surveyed parents at the beginning of the year, it was to take the temperature, to know what we were working with. And then Desi came along and said, you need to do 3 pans, and then you got to do your 6 feet apart. Or then they said, well, 3 feet. And then we wanted to err on the side of caution. We went 6 feet. I don't need to repeat history. It's like banging our heads against the wall, but I'm full of it tonight. So, but I think that if we did a survey, we would have to be very clear, because I think we're going to have a lot of people say, oh yeah, another one of their surveys, and they're going to just do the opposite of what we say. And so we would have to be really clear that it would be to take the temperature. And to Dr. Gifford's point, I would wonder the value in any data is valuable, but nobody in virtual is gonna, and we've heard a lot of people that want to go full in person, but we've also heard a lot from a lot of people who are appreciative of the fact that we have been erring on the side of caution. But if we did a survey, my vote to repeat myself 3 times is to just be clear about it being a taking the temperature, and not a, you got first place, you got second place, you got third place, and it's law.
No, very fair point. Thank you, Mrs. Amaral. On another note, Dr. Gifford, I know in speaking with some of my other colleagues in other districts, other school committee members in other districts, that at least as far as I'm concerned, the Tri-Town, Marion, Mattapoisett, Rochester, they are fully back K through 2 only right now. I'm not sure about, I know Acushnet is also moving in that direction. I'm not sure about Fairhaven. Are you aware of any districts that have already committed to, and I know Freetown Lakeville did something funky with bringing back transition grades, whether it was like 5 or 6, and then maybe 8th grade and 9th grade. Are you aware of any districts in the area that have gone full bore?
Yeah, other than what you've just mentioned, I also know that Berkeley actually started today with full in-person, similar to what we were speaking about, transitioning over the next couple of weeks. I don't have the exact data with me, but that came through an email. He was just letting us know. And I believe Swansea has put out a notice to their parents that they're going to be moving in this direction as well.
Dr. Gifford, is that just elementary when you say full in person? I just
Yeah,
want to
that's-
clarify that. Okay.
That's what I know right now, yeah. But I know Berkeley started today with 1 or 2 of their grades.
Okay.
Was that at Berkeley Middle School though, or just at the elementary level?
Guys, yeah, like an elementary.
At the elementary level. So,
Yeah.
so right now, there's no other districts that you're aware of at the middle school and high school level?
Nobody's made any outreach to me to let me know. And I
Okay.
haven't really
And
inquired.
I've reached out. I've tried to do my research and speak to
Yeah.
people. Mr. Nunes, did you have a question? And then Mrs. Waite.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make a motion that we approve the superintendent's recommendation of March 29th to bring pre-K and K back. April 5th, grades 1, 3, and 5, and April 12th, grades 2 and 4 back full.
Do I have a second? Mary, are you saying something?
I just want to ask a question real quick before we.
Well, we need a second, then we can have discussion.
Okay. I don't know how I feel about that.
You can vote
Well,
against it. You can just have a.
Yeah, at this point, the motion fails because we haven't had a second, Mr. Nunes.
Sorry.
Okay.
Mr. Jones.
Mrs. Waite?
I just was scanning quickly if so we've gotten some emails that have come in during our discussion, not surprisingly, but one of the thoughts one of the points that or questions that came up, I think, is certainly something we can discuss quickly is, have you seen, we're talking about these schools coming back. Have you seen any schools in person, whether it's private, that are, that are utilizing 3 feet social distancing? Have you been able to see any of those like in operational? I guess that's kind of the question I'm trying to spit out. Sorry to stumble over that, but.
The only one I saw was today when we went over to Stang, because they were, again, it's a high school, but
Right.
we did visit there to see how the desks were set up, et cetera. So as far as an elementary school, I haven't visited any.
Okay.
No.
And do they have as many, does Stang have as many students per classroom typically that we would have in a typical, say, like 9th grade social studies course? I mean, do they have as many students per class?
I honestly don't know. I do know, looking at the school, the classrooms are a lot bigger.
Right. I mean, and all those things are really important because we have, when we talk about, people say like, well, we need to look at other schools. I think that is important. Like the classroom size is critical to this, and how many students that we're talking about trying to do in those classrooms. So,
Right.
Okay. That was my.
Thank you, Mrs. Waite. Mr. Nunes?
Yeah, in all seriousness, Mr. Chairman, I mean, you're talking apples and oranges in the sense of you're talking a public school and you're talking a
Right.
private school where parents are paying tuition. So they, with all due respect, the kids are going to have their nose to the grindstone. The parents are going to make sure that the kids and everyone and the staff everybody is behaving themselves and doing what they have to do to keep, social distancing and masks and such so that everybody can stay in school. So personal opinion, you're apples and oranges between public and parochial and private schools. No different than the charter schools the parochial elementary schools in the city of New Bedford.
Thank you, Mr. Nunes. With that, myself, I'm only ready to vote on, and I don't even know, do we even need to take a vote? Is this a committee vote, or is this just based on, under Dr. Gifford's control?
I think with this important decision, normally we just do what we do, but a vote just to see, or if you just want to have consensus, it's helpful, I guess.
I think we need to have, I think it's a vote in all seriousness, Chris, at this point in time, because of where we are and what's going on, I think
Right.
a vote of the committee to support the superintendent with what the administration wants to do to bring students back is important.
I agree.
I would certainly agree with that. With that, I'm going to say, I will say this. I'm prepared to approve PK and K for that March 29th. I'm not ready to approve anything else at this time until we see how that rollout goes. I think we need to look at the long run. I think we need to have a plan in place that if staff and educators were to get vaccinated, say by the end of April, that we're ready to go to open fully. But I cannot support. And then also to John's point, I also, in addition to the email, in addition to the letters that I signed on behalf of the Dartmouth School Committee, I individually emailed Mark Montigny, Chris Markey. I had a conversation with Mr. Markey. I've had a conversation with the president of MASC, Glenn Kuchar, to get his feeling on the commissioner's stance and everything that's going on. So with that, I still have serious reservations and concerns about student safety, staff safety. I live it. I live it every day. And besides my job here on my volunteer position here on school committee, as many of you know, I do work in another school district. My family is extremely careful around this virus. And it struck us. Both myself, my wife, and my daughter all came down with COVID. This is nothing to joke around with. This is it's scary, and it causes a lot of anxiety, not just to adults. Make no mistake about it that it's just adults. It's students. I saw it in my own daughter. So this is very personal to me. So that's why I don't think that any one of us disagrees that we don't want every single student back in school. I don't think that the teachers don't want every single student back in school. We want everyone back in school. It's easier. It's easier for everyone to teach. It's easier for teachers to teach. It's easier for all of us to do our jobs when the students are back in school. So I can only, at this point in time, I appreciate that motion, Mr. Nunes, but I can only support it, and that's fine. Whoever wants to make a motion, we can see where it goes. I'm only one vote. Mrs. Amaral?
I certainly don't want this to be, this is not a kicking down the curb, but we're meeting next week. And we just had the director, we just had Chris Michaud here talking about the next week. And, to John's point about, being supportive of nothing's going to, I would like to see high needs kids come back tomorrow, but nothing's going to change in terms of, planning is still happening. Is there a chance that the committee would be agreeable to sort of wait to see what the numbers do for the next week in terms of I just thought of it. Coming out of my mouth as I'm thinking of it. No? So you're thinking it's not going to make, I'm looking at faces.
I'm sorry. If you want with all due respect, if you want my opinion, the quicker we put this in motion, right, wrong, or indifferent, the quicker we put this in motion, it gives them more time to get everything in place. That, again, my opinion only. Okay.
Yeah.
I go back to a year ago when Mr. Oliver, Chris, and I had a conversation on a Thursday or a Friday afternoon. I think it's next week per se, a year ago, and we were talking about COVID and that type of deal. And I said to him, I said, look, I prefer to keep the schools open and let it ride and see what happens. However, whatever the superintendent wants to do, I support, but she's got to make the decision per se on Friday, because she can't make that decision to shut schools down at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night for a week. If you understand what I'm saying, because of childcare decisions. Of course, the governor took that out of our hands, don't get me wrong, but understand what I'm saying. The more time that we have to get this going, and they have to get this working and get the plan in place, the better off we are. My opinion.
I do agree that we owe it to the parents and the families in this town to give them the time to plan. Any other thoughts? I personally, like I said, I'm ready to approve looking to bring pre-K and K back to 29th. As far as the next grades, what is it, 1 and 2? I'm just, maybe we look to stagger them out. I think you had set them up, and I don't have the dates in front of me. I can't find it in my papers, Dr. Gifford. But are they back-to-back weeks, or are they 2 weeks
Yeah.
apart?
Back-to-back weeks.
They're
Yeah.
back to back.
Okay.
But it's April 5th is first, third, and fifth coming in, Chris.
Yeah.
And then April 12th is second and fourth. So it's not, first and second on April 5th. It's, you still bring in those, that older grade of the fifth on the 5th. If that helps. A fifth
What,
grade.
so what if we do this? What if we space out the return 2 weeks apart instead of a week apart, just to give us some room to make sure that, because there's going to be logistical challenges one way or the other, bringing 2 grades back at a time, that first time with pre-K and K, and then the next week with the 3 grades, there's going to be logistical challenges. So are we okay with trying? I'm just trying to get something out there. I agree with Mr. Nunes that we need to do something tonight to get the ball rolling. I would feel better. I would feel better with a couple of weeks apart, and then hopefully in the meantime that educators are going to start getting vaccinated along with school staff.
Yeah,
Chris,
Mr.
can I-
Mr.
sorry.
Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Nunes.
Yeah, I mean, the problem you have is you've got the week, if you go to the 29th with the pre-K and the K, and then you wait till the 12th, well, okay, those 1, 3, and 5 are only going to be in a week. And then the week of the 19th is April vacation. So now you're waiting until the 26th, So now you're, basically going to May 3rd. You're already into May before you're bringing back, the way I would read it, grades 2 and 4. And at that point in time, you are just about dead in the water, my opinion, of bringing back middle and high school students.
Would it be possible, Dr. 1 second, Mrs. Wade, would it be possible, Dr. Gifford, to maybe move up to, would you be ready for pre-K and K on March 22nd?
I believe we are, but Mr. Kiley, you know the number of desks we would need at that point? I think we can manage that.
I think maybe with just K and pre-K, we could
Right.
accomplish that. We'd have to, steal some and
Yeah.
figure it all out, but we
Big borrowers.
probably could do it.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Wade?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to go back though to Dr. Gifford, and this is circling around to something that really, again, I'm still frustrated about Mcas, still happening, but I think the rationale also for staggering for those particular weeks was that the kids would adjust before they were, forced to sit for that, and that would be a problem, and again, getting back to Mr. Nunes' point that then we're hitting April vacation. I just, it sounds like it sounded, we're not dealing directly with middle school and high school, but I got the impression that that might not even be part of the conversation. Anyway, that's not what we're dealing with. But I can see that as if we're having these kids do it. I'm stumbling over my words. I apologize, but I could see that's an issue that we've got to let them have some time to settle in before they jump into this. So,
Mrs. Amaral, you had your hand up?
I forget what my question is. I would like, though, with what you just said, a reiteration of the timeline, if you don't mind, because I've written so many notes down.
Yes,
I've lost myself.
I agree with you.
And if you could say, adjust it to what Chris just said, say perhaps if we're able to, bringing back pre-K and K. What did you say, Chris, on the 22nd?
The 22nd.
Yeah.
So you're saying establish a new timeline, Mrs. Amaral, based on the 22nd? I think that's what she said.
Then are you thinking the 5th and the 12th and skip? Wait a minute. I'm looking at a calendar.
yeah, I still think that's the same issue.
So it'd be
22nd.
So
And
bring
then
the,
leave a week, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so pre-K and K on March 22nd,
so
and then 2 weeks out on April 5th.
5th.
would be 1, 3, and 5.
Yeah. So really, the only thing that shifts is the pre-KK, and that gives time in between to see how it's going, I guess is what you're looking
Let me,
at.
Chris, let me ask this, do we then bring 2 and 4 back on the 26th, the week after vacation, or we bring them back the 12th? I'd like to see them back on the 12th.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'd like to
Again,
Try for that, hoping that vaccines are in place and it's before the vacation. MCAS, again, without MCAS, we'll manage around it.
I mean, again, go back to the 29th, we had Chris sign letter the 25th. And Chris wrote on the 29th, and he signed the letters to everybody that said, put the MCAS aside for this year.
Clearly, the state only wants to listen to us when they feel like it.
Yeah. Amen.
Dr. Gifford, I'll defer to you I'll defer to you and Mr. Kiley on the call as far as what do you think for the bringing back second and fourth before or after April vacation? I know the logistics involved, it's huge.
I'd like to strive for before vacation and giving Mr. Kiley a little bit, he's already looked into the purchasing. Again, I hate to keep saying about tests, but unfortunately it is a point of, if we could pull everything we have out of the storage and just use it, that's a different point of view. But I think if we set those dates and if we have to, when it gets closer, move them a little bit forward, it won't be a deal breaker, if you will. Unless I'm just looking at a calendar here. Pre-KK on the 22nd, 1 and 5 on the 29th. If we go right along and just bring fewer than we had,
Chris?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, again, are we looking at bringing 1, 3, and 5 back on the 29th, or again, going with that 2 week?
I'd personally like to see
Go
the
to
2 weeks.
And again,
all right, so the 29th.
I mean, and, look, I'd like to, if we're doing that, I mean, I'd still like to bring 2 and 4 back on the 12th so that they're in before, they at least get a weekend before school vacation.
Let's shoot for that. We can always adjust our plans and we give people enough time to make plans. If we say the 22nd, we start with pre-KK, 4, 5, 1, 3, 5. For April 5th, we do 1, 3, and 5. And the 12th, we do 2 and 4. Again, we can shift our plans. If something's come up, we don't feel that it's right. But it gives us something to shoot for. We've already talked about bringing, like I said, furniture out of the storage, getting classrooms set up, thinking about lunches, all of that is in place already. It's just to give a tentative date to parents, I think, and teachers. We have the 8th set aside for teachers to plan.
Yeah, that's fine.
Maybe we'll all have vaccines by then.
I will support that. I'm reluctant to support it. I know we need our kids back in school, but we also,
Yeah.
it's so tough. It's so tough. And, obviously, Dr. Gifford and Mr. Kiley, if you feel as though, some of these benchmarks can't be hit because of whether it's furniture or whether it's staffing,
Yeah.
please let the committee know and keep us updated.
Right, because that's another point. You're right, staffing as well, so.
I personally think, there'll be a number of hurdles that we have to get over in order to make this all happen. So I don't know. Does anyone else have any other thoughts before we? Yes, Mrs. Amaral.
Just not to sort of just beat this over and over. I would like to see this return in these grades also include a deeper dive into kiddos who in our middle, if we approve this, those kids that are in the higher levels, prioritizing them for in-person as well,
So would it be fair to say then with Kathleen's statement, Dr. Gifford, that maybe by our next meeting, we can have that conversation on the agenda about, or just you can brief us quickly on what your thoughts are and plans are after speaking with the middle school and high school administration about getting those kiddos back that would benefit from in-person learning because for one reason or another.
Yes, we can do that. Yeah, I'll see what I can dig up.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
You're on mute.
You're muted, Chris.
With that, Chair will entertain a motion to approve a return to school plan for pre-K and K starting on March 22nd, followed by grades 1, 3, and 5 on April 5th, and followed by grades 2 and am I?
Yeah.
And then grades 2 and 4 on April 12th.
I'll make that
I'll
motion,
second.
which is
I'll second.
what I did earlier.
So I have a motion by Mr. Nunes, a second by Mrs. Waite. On the motion, any other discussion? The only caveat that I'll add to this is I would just ask Dr. Gifford and Mr. Kiley that if you get word from Mr. Meshard with data, obviously, that those are published weekly anyway. So the public will be aware of changes in COVID positives. So I would just ask you to keep an eye, and as you always, like you normally do, keep in touch with Mr. Meshard.
Sure.
And I just like to say again that, for all the parents in the community that's watching, I just hope everyone reaches out and again, it emphasizes that we need vaccines and we need to prioritize our staff. I mean that, we've done it. We've sent a note, I just hope that, parents who want their kids back, that they, they see it's we need to have our staff be safe, and, they're on the front lines with our kids. They make the experience for them. So we need them to be protected and safe, and so it's a community effort to get that to happen here.
And somebody please understand that we being the committee and administration, along with Mr. Michaud and everyone else, are doing the best that we can do based on the information and everything that we have.
Right.
No, I agree. It's just, it's extremely frustrating, as we're all aware that the state as well as the Department of Education is still conducting their work, as far as I'm concerned, from home.
Yeah.
So with that,
Roll call.
roll call, please. Yes, roll call. Thank you.
No problem.
Chris Oliver,
Yes.
Kathleen Amaral,
Yes.
Mary Waite,
Yes.
John Nunes.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously 4-0. And I know we've said it a number of times. Please get K-12 public staff vaccinated. Governor Baker and Commissioner Riley, please.
And again, the teachers, Mass Teachers Union has got to get, their body to get to the executive branch up on the hill, as they say.
No, you hit the nail on the head, Mr. Nunes, with that.
And
Oh, go ahead, Mrs. Waite.
No, Dr. Gifford, just a note came in, again, and we're all probably getting the same emails, but a parent just asked, and I think it's a good question. If you are not comfortable, and I know we touched on this before, sending your child back, you're comfortable with hybrid, you're not comfortable with the move, can you switch to full online? That was the question.
Oh, come on, let them figure it
Full
out.
virtual.
That's
You're
a very
muted, Dr. Gifford.
that's a fair point, Mrs. Waite.
There we go. I think the best thing would be for that parent, the particular parent, to read. I don't want to make a blanket statement because
Okay.
the way the curriculum is and where the student is,
Mhm.
if it's a high school student, it might be different than.
I think it's an elementary student parent. That's my impression. So
Yeah, and I have to say our virtual academy is really at full capacity. So if it was a number of students, that would certainly be a big conversation.
Okay. Thank you.
So piggybacking, I know we need to get to the budget, and I know we're running well over our anticipated time, but really quickly, I think it's important for our next meeting to have in the agenda, because we know there's going to be, like Mary said, those parents are not going to want to send their kids in at the elementary level. So I think it's just something for you, Dr. Gifford, and your team to think about.
Yes, among a million things, right?
Yeah, that's right. With that, at this time, I would like to turn the meeting over to Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations, James Kiley, for the FY22 budget presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. I think Dr. Gifford's actually going to start us off.
Actually, we did talk about this today, but given the late time, I'm going to allow Mr. Kiley to just move it along. You know the intro to how we develop our budget, et cetera, nothing new, but I'm going to let Mr. Kiley dig right in.
Okay. I will share my screen here. So I guess first I just want to thank you all for the opportunity to discuss the FY22 budget. With the lateness tonight, I was wondering if it really was going to happen. So, again, so every year we talk about this, and, we try and make all of these budget decisions thoughtful and in line with the district improvement plan, with the school improvement plans, with our mission. And again, our mission is to provide a quality education for all learners. We have, these haven't changed. These are our strategic objectives in each of, the key areas of our strategic plan. And they are sort of set the backdrop for our school improvement plans that ultimately drives the school proposals in the budget process. Some of the key things that we look to in our process is obviously trying to maintain and improve upon what we're already doing. And that becomes increasingly difficult with, the pressure that we're under in terms of resources at this point and staffing. But, we're focused on making sure that we provide the supports and quality programs and continue to, offer those to the community through this budget. We are constantly trying to enhance the technology infrastructure and equipment. It's never been more important than it is right now today. And, that's been a process that I think has paid off. And the support that we've had through the town through the years has really allowed us to be successful in our remote learning stages and our hybrid learning and synchronous learning. And, it's been evident that that was a major factor in the success that we have had through this crisis. In addition to all the effort that we've made to enhance technology in teaching and learning through our instructional technology specialists and Mr. Galashaw and his staff. It's and obviously all the teaching staff, it's made a big difference for us. Class size, always a thing that we need to keep in mind. I provided in your budget packets some enrollment information. I wouldn't look too closely, in terms of comparing that to last year, because obviously this year is an extremely complex situation where you have more students doing other things than they normally would in terms of homeschooling, private school, virtual learning, certainly. So it's been difficult, possibly delaying school and entering school late for the youngsters, entering kindergarten. That's something that we're anticipating, and hopefully we'll do our best to be prepared for. We are always looking to enhance curriculum, instruction, and assessment, increasing our support for all learners. You'll see some of our budget proposals clearly tied to that. Increasing our capacity for social, emotional, and mental health support, also part of those proposals, and supporting professional development for our staff. So when you look at our budget for FY22, we're proposing a budget of $47,338,665. So the big piece of the pie is the green piece on your screen, is the instruction category. Naturally, it's about 75% of our budget. It includes teacher salaries, principals, teacher assistants, substitutes, other instructional staff, instructional technology, professional development, special education services, books, supplies, lots and lots of stuff. Most everything that happens in the classroom is incorporated into that 75% piece of the pie. The next biggest piece of the pie is other services. So other services, according to the Department of Ed classifications, include things like transportation, which is one of the most expensive individual items in the district, attendance, health. So, spotlight on health this year for sure with our nurses and the amazing work they're doing. That part of the budget supports their work. Athletics, other co-curricular activities like music, art, and all clubs, all of that is in other services. Then we have maintenance, and so that's maintenance and utilities. That's about 8% of our budget. So it's a substantial portion of what we do, maintaining these aging buildings. That was brought up earlier tonight. And we do our best to do that within the parameters between this funding and the capital improvement planning process. We have administrative expenses, about 2% of the budget. So that would be district-wide administration. Administrative technology is included in there. That's sort of district-wide. And probably the other largest item in that would be legal services. So that's about 2% of our budget overall. And the last piece of the pie there is tuitions for out-of-district students. So students who can't be served in district, that's about 4% of our overall budget. So, in preparing this FY22 budget, we'll talk a little bit coming up on some of the other slides about our thought process and what we were trying to accomplish. But really, in the end, these proportions are consistent with what we've spent the last couple of years. So this slide shows on the instruction side of the budget an increase of about 3%. So that increase is related primarily to contractual obligations for salaries and negotiated items. It also includes some reclassified expenses because the Department of Ed likes to monkey around with the chart of account structure periodically and switch things from one category to another, which they've done with technology expenditures and some administrative categories. So overall, instruction up about 3%. It's by far the largest increase in terms of category, and about $1 million increase right there in instruction. On the administration side of the budget, we have a decrease. We've restructured a couple of positions. The assistant superintendent, director of teaching and learning position, we are proposing a restructuring, as well as my assistant and the transportation reception position. So those are both through attrition. Obviously, Ms. Roy retiring and my assistant resigned over the summer, and we've made some restructuring moves there to help save some money in the district. We, on maintenance and utilities, that's basically stable. On other services, we definitely anticipate, so Mr. Nunes mentioned, we're out to bid right now on transportation. We'll have some hard numbers fairly soon. I have a pre-bid conference on Wednesday and a bid opening next week. Hopefully, if all goes well with that, we'll have something to bring to you for a vote at some point in the near future. But we'll definitely have an increase in transportation costs. It's pretty amazing what we've had to do in transportation throughout this COVID crisis, and yeah, not to get back into the school reopening talk, but it definitely is incongruous the way this guidance suddenly shifted. So we'll I don't know. It doesn't make a lot of sense going from what we were doing to what we're doing in terms of transportation. But we'll obviously do our best to keep kids safe and continue to do that. Our transportation provider has been great working with us on that. So we're not quite sure what it's going to look like in the fall, but we are out to bid. So hopefully we have some numbers for you in the near future. Also, the minimum wage increase. Some of our staff, like particularly our playground cafeteria monitors, very closely tied to the minimum wage. That minimum wage increase, is built into those positions in other services. And then tuitions, we expect an increase based on student needs, as well as the fact that annually those schools receive a increase approved by the Department of Ed. So overall, that brings us to the bottom line, which is a $1,751,000 increase, about 3.8%. So what did we do within that? The sad thing is, you'd look at 3.8% and say, okay, they must be doing some, adding some great things, and I think we are adding some good things. We're just not adding a lot of them. We have proposed adding an outreach social worker. There's a part-time person at the Cushman School. We'd be expanding that position to full-time. We are also proposing another social worker, full-time for the district. That person will not be allocated to one specific school, but will be able to support several schools in the district. And then a specialized reading program. This is something that we really don't have a choice. We have to do this. It's been something that we need to support students with dyslexia. So those are really the only things outside of the norm and status quo that we've added to the budget at this point. So this, there's a lot of positions listed on here, and I won't speak to every single one, but I think of particular note, so this is sort of our plus and minus staffing for the year. So overall, we've decreased positions, 4 positions net for FY22 in this budget. We have the 1.5 outreach social workers that I discussed on the previous slide. And if there's ever been a time that we need to support kids' social and emotional health, this is the time. And, there were proposals before now that were presented pretty much on an annual basis, by some of the schools, and now it's just, it's so obvious to us that we need to focus on this and make sure that as we do come back and bring kids back into school more fully, that we're able to support them. So we also listed there are the positions that we have proposed, we've restructured at this point. So those are listed, as well as some other pluses and minuses through the, through that have either already taken place through the year that we've sort of had to adjust, or, are proposed down the road for next year. So the two restructuring, that would be a net result of 1.7 FTEs, decreased on the administration side there. Budget requests not funded. This is not an exhaustive list. I did not write every single budget request not funded, but I think the one of the keys on this slide is to look at the outreach social worker positions that, while not funded directly the way schools might have wanted them, we are hoping to be able to support them nonetheless. Some other requests not specifically funded on this list, we hope to be able to support through school choice funding, as we have been able to do in the past. That would be more the one-time purchases, typically not staffing. We've tried everything we can to not use that funding for staffing, as it might not be a permanent source for us. We don't want to go in that direction, but you're looking at $600,000 of other requests out there. So it's substantial amount of requests, and these are thoughtful proposals for the schools, many of which would, they all would have had a positive impact on students, and unfortunately weren't able to be incorporated into the budget this year. So those are the factors that make up our FY22 budget proposal. I have provided you all with an electronic version of the budget. We tried to improve it this year. It's not just a regular PDF. It has some tabs built into the PDF. So if you download it and look at it that way, it should be a little bit of a easier experience. And we still have extra books available. If anyone would like a hard copy budget book, I'd be happy to provide it. All of the backup information is in there. I'm available. Our hope is that over the next couple of, we have really now a couple of school committee meetings to be able to, have good, thoughtful discussion with the school committee about this budget proposal. Our hope would be to still have the public budget hearing on March 22nd, but we could be flexible with that if the committee needs it. And we will go from there. So I appreciate finally getting the opportunity to present this thing, and look forward to talking with you about it. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Kiley. I always appreciate, I know I speak for the committee when I say we always appreciate the level of detail that you do put into your budget, not only your presentations, but your budget binders that you share with the school committee to really look at the finite details of the school department budget to help us get a better understanding of our fiduciary responsibilities that we have as a school committee. So I think that's really important. I'd be lying if I said I was excited and I was not disappointed. But the percentage, which was, I don't have it in front of me, it was 3.7,
3.8, yeah.
3.8%, and what we're really looking at getting for that. It's a little disheartening. I know that you've had conversations. I know you're always in contact with Town Hall and what's coming out of there. So I'll be curious over the next couple of weeks as we continue, the committee continues to, have discussions around the budget and with you, if anything changes or I'm really curious as at the transportation bit as well, because that'll be a big key. I'll open it up for any quick questions. I know we're all kind of burnt out right now. It's almost 9:15. Obviously the budget is a big deal. And at least we had the opportunity for Mr. Kiley to present it. And I'd love for us to continue, maybe take this back, digest it a little bit more, and then be prepared at the next school committee meeting to ask questions, or also if there's some data that maybe Mr. Kiley wouldn't have readily available, that you would email him your questions in advance, if it's around finances, that so he could have that information available and ready to go. But I will open it up for questions for anyone that may have something right now. I'll start with Mr. Nunes. You're first on my screen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim, thank you very much. First and foremost, what time is that pre-bidders conference on Wednesday with the?
I believe it's at 10. Just let me confirm that.
Yeah, I mean, if you just shoot me a text or an email and confirm it, I'm going to try and.
It's at 10 a.m. here at Bush Street. We've reserved the conference room, obviously social distancing and.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to try and pop in if that's okay.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Number two, thank you very much for this. I haven't had a chance to dive into it, but as you and I have talked a couple of times, I will sit down and give you a call to go over things. But thank you very much. And again, in all seriousness, my thanks to all the administrators. Both the building and the special. I think of Mr. Christofuli and as the director of athletics and health and phys ed, and Mr. Flynn, who's the music director of music, for putting things, together, reasonable budgets. I'm always one of those that I always like to see, what did we get, what did we not get, and to have, the amount of money. We're not too bad this year. I think it was $500,000, a little over $500,000 that we couldn't fund per se type of deal. But again, it's not things that, they're not pie in the skies. They're not, it's not somebody looking for, a Maserati or a Lexus or, something of that nature. I mean, they're looking for, Chevrolets and Hondas type of deal to, just to keep their program going. So I appreciate everything that they have. And I guess my last comment is my next to the last comment is, again, my usual, again, if we were at where the state says we should be, we'd have another $8.5 million, and we wouldn't have to sit here and have many of these discussions type of deal, but it is what it is. That being said, in all seriousness, Mr. Kiley, have you heard anything from Town Hall / the state? I know the governor's budget's out. When I looked at it, I was not impressed. But, have you heard anything, in conversation with Mr. Bonds and Mr. McGinnis as to where things are looking for the town? I know they're knee deep into putting everything together.
Yeah, they have challenges for sure. I think from, the one thing about the governor's budget, while not going to save us or be this, this incredible source of, fueling our success. On the other hand, it wasn't a decrease. There is an increase to the town in funding, and any increase is good, I think, at this point in time, given the uncertainty that that's out there. I would say anything but a decrease. I can handle. I'll say that the town got some very favorable information in terms of health insurance, which is always a big factor in the overall budget of the town. So I think, although we don't have the specific information as to our rating and why we got a good rate, it looks like the town's health insurance is going to be about a 1% increase, and then may also incorporate a payment holiday, which would the net result of which would be a decrease for staff for next year. Now that's also a decrease on the town side, or at least only a modest increase, very small increase. So certainly less than I'm sure what they were projecting. So I think that was really good, favorable information. I don't think that's gonna offset the difficulties of tax revenue and given the pandemic. But there's a lot of, I think we're probably behind where we would be in terms of knowing where this budget's going. That's probably no surprise to you, Mr. Nunes, and probably not to anyone else. But yeah, we're a little behind schedule on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm good. I appreciate, again, my thanks to the administration and all the building administrators and the directors for their hard work in getting this in. In all seriousness, the budget subcommittee, our budget subcommittee for looking at this. I appreciate the work you guys have put into this.
Thank you, Mr. Nunes. Anyone else? Mrs. Waite?
I was going to tease you and say that I have about 20 questions to ask right now.
Why don't we hold most of them till the next meeting?
Yeah. No, I did want to, say, first of all, echo what, again, John and Chris have said, that, this is a tremendous amount of work, so thank you, everybody, the budget subcommittee. I also, I know we're going to be revisiting this. Dr. Jenkins is not here. I think she, she often brings up the point that, the amount of revenue that we in this town commit to our students is not what we need to really, and it's amazing what we're able to achieve given the small budget that we have. It's late, I apologize, but I think, it's just incredible what we're able to do, what our staff put out, what they, what our administrators are able to work with. I mean, and I'm, I think every school, certainly is dependent on, for their enrichment programs on their PTOs. So I'm very grateful to, those people who put the hard work in raising money too. It's just, really a testament to the dedication of so many people, but, we should have more to work with than we do. And so I'm very impressed with what you've put on the table. And again, to your point, underscoring and emphasizing that we need to have social emotional support for these kids. And we know that's in front of us. I know we'll be talking more about this next week, but yeah, I get kudos overall and a job well done. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Waite. Anything else, Mrs. Amaral?
Yeah, thank you for this. It's a lot. It's late. I have more of a tongue-in-cheek sort of commentary on DESE again. Sorry, Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. I just wanted to mention I'm happy to see the dyslexia. The money sort of put aside and some things that we have to do. But I just want to note that this has historically been an issue, but the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education first brought this up in 2016. And then there was the law in 2018. So I'm just really glad they gave themselves 2 years to put out guidance. And that's just my fresh commentary, but I'm glad to see it coming to fruition, but love how they gave themselves a lot of time to figure it out.
Thank you, Kathleen. With that, I do have a number of questions, Mr. Kiley and Dr. Gifford, but I will reserve them for our next meeting. I think that's fair to say. But I do appreciate, once again, you taking the time and always being so thoughtful around the budget process. So I look forward to continuing this conversation with my colleagues. I know we're all burnt out. It's been a long evening. I appreciate the thoughtful discussion. I know that we're not going to make everyone happy. We will never make everyone happy, and that's the positions that we're in, and it is what it is. And for those of those of the viewing public that are watching, if you're not happy and you're always frustrated, I encourage you to run for elected office.
It's
So
it's a lot different on this side than it is out there, Mr. Chairman.
you know what, Mr. Nunes, you could say that more than anyone else from your tenure on the school committee. But 8 years ago, me sitting in the audience and watching school committee meetings, and now sitting where I am now, it's a thankless job, but I'm dedicated. I know that all of you are dedicated.
Yep.
I have a vested interest with my high school freshman at Dartmouth
Yep.
High that loves Dartmouth and bleeds green, and we do this for them.
That's
So
absolutely right.
I thank you all. At this time, I will.
Mr. Chairman, one
First,
quick-
before I adjourn, I'd just like to say the next regularly scheduled meeting of the Dartmouth School Committee is scheduled for Monday, March 8th, 2021 at 6:30. Mr. Nunes, you had a question or you want to
Yeah,
comment?
real quick, have we heard anything on the VOC minutes? I just happened to be catching a VOC school committee the other night, and was just wondering if we've heard anything from them on the minutes.
I have not. I do vaguely remember I'm not sure in passing if I had a conversation with Superintendent O'Brien about what specifically you were looking for. I believe I can find out for sure that this was because I know that you had brought that up several months ago.
Yeah.
So I can certainly look, try to
fine.
follow up with
Okay,
either Mr. O'Brien or one of our reps to vote.
okay, that's fine.
Mrs. Amaral?
I just had an announcement I wanted to share, that anybody that would, would consider, I think this is a great time to do so. I love when we can acknowledge both our students and our staff, but the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education is currently accepting applications to nominate a Teacher of the Year. The Teacher of the Year award honors Massachusetts teachers who exemplify excellent teaching in the Commonwealth. It goes on to give a little bit more in detail, but anyone that's watching, anyone that that is really grateful for the learning, although different, although less than previous years in some respects, I think that it would be really great if people could think about nominating the teacher. You can just Google Massachusetts Teacher of the Year. It'll come up. The deadline is March 8th.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Mr. Nunes, a second by Mrs. Waite to adjourn. On the motion, any further discussion? Typically, this wouldn't be a roll call, but since we're remote, roll call, please, Ms. Genther.
Chris Oliver,
Yes.
Kathleen Amaral,
Yes.
Mary Waite,
Yes.
John Nunes.
Absolutely.
This meeting is adjourned, everyone. Thank you for your time and dedication. Good night,
Good job,
everyone.
everybody. Thank you. Good
Wait,
night.
thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Oh, yeah.